Hi, everybody. My name is Diego. I'm the program manager of curriculum here at Lambda. And in this video, we're going to be talking about counterplan theory. So if you're watching this video, chances are you're either in the JV division or maybe you just want a refresher and you're in a higher division like the varsity one. Uh, in this video, we're going to be talking about different types of counterplans that are either allowed or not allowed in debate, and the gray line between that becomes murky. Aside from answering a counterplan on a substantive level, does the counterplan solve as much as the affirmative? Does it link to the disad? Are there certain things about the is the counterplan textually and functionally competitive? Is it mutually exclusive? Is there area for a perm? Aside from all those things, there is one more thing to address, and that is whether or not counterplans are theoretically legitimate. So let's talk about what theory is first. Theory arguments are arguments in debate that establish what kinds of practices are acceptable and what aren't. Pretty similar to topicality, but where topicality is a debate about what the words in the resolution means, theory is more about certain practices in debate and whether or not they should be just allowed flat out, and how that disrupts either affirmative or negative strategy. I want you to think of this kind of like determining what should be considered fouls in a sport. So, what is the difference between like a foul in basketball? Like, why would a ref consider one thing to be a foul and another thing not to be a foul? That is essentially what I think, how I think of theory debates. There are gray lines that we have to figure out. In some cases, these things should be allowed. In some cases, they shouldn't. Um, and then in some cases, some people use theory debates to completely side skirt the actual debate, which is kind of like foul baiting. But aside from that, this will make sense as time goes on. Example question is, would you let the negative team read a counter plan that solves all of world hunger immediately? Just like immediately, all these problems go away. Um, would you allow that? Chances are, and like if you're thinking about this from like a fairness side of things, you probably wouldn't, because it means that the negative can usually solve a bigger impact than the affirmative. And if you just let them do it without like any questions whatsoever, they don't have any solvency deficits, nothing like that, makes it a really uphill battle for the affirmative to win any debate. It would feel unfair. It would feel like they're cheating. And so what that is what theory is getting at. At what point are certain types of arguments allowed, and at what point are they not? Um, how does theory come up? Uh, Theory comes up in two major ways. The first one is counterplan debates. Many counterplans have plan texts that do not make realistic sense. Many counterplans base their functional or textual competition on debatable foundations that make theory debates necessary to have. We'll give an example using the state's counterplan. And then there's also the question of fiat. How much should the affirmative and negative be able to fiat? How much can they just like completely step away debates from? It also comes up in K debates. What should the alternative be allowed to do? Oftentimes, the alternative is not a single action, but more like a mindset shift or more like a change in the way we view the world. So, to that sense, what should the alternative be allowed to claim in terms of solvency? How should debates function under K debates? Those are framework debates that happen in the 2AC, 2NC, and those are also theory debates as well. Um, Elements of a theory shell, it's essentially a T shell. You have an interpretation of what things should be allowed slash not allowed in debate. You have a violation, you have standards, and reasons to reject slash impacts. They usually are fairness in education. I'm going to show you a very simple version of the state's counterplan theory shell. It's most likely different than what you're reading, but this kind of helps to paint the picture. So, let's look at this example 2AC shell from a state's counterplan theory argument. So, interpretation from the 2AC, this is the affirmative going up against a state's counterplan that says the 50 states should do whatever the affirmative just said instead of the federal government. Aside from stuff saying that maybe, states can't implement uniform standards, aside from permutation arguments saying that the federal government and states can coexist, implement the same policy, aside from those substantive reasons, you're also going to have a theory argument as well that says interpretation states counterplans are illegitimate. Violation, the 1 and C reads it. Here are two standards for why this is the case. First, it's utopian. The negative can fiat all 50 states agreeing on the same plan, which makes it impossible for the AF to negate and impossible to substantively clash over. There's no world where an affirmative is reading 50 cards against each state, and there's no world where the negative is going to read that either. And so, because of that, it relies on an unrealistic sense of what the negative is allowed to do. Um, but also, that also makes evidence standards like kind of like impossible. The negative is not required to present 50 solvency advocates, which makes an uphill battle for the affirmative. So the negative can just say the 50 states are going to do this, pretend like they will, and they get to compare that against a 1AC with actual solvency advocates for what the plan is supposed to be doing. If that's the case and the judge lets the negative get away with just reading a 50 states counterplan with these solvency advocates, uh, at some point you're going to have to treat that counterplan on the same level as the affirmative. And in that world, it makes the affirmative's job to negate the counterplan a lot harder because there's just not enough evidence. There is no evidence that probably exists to show that the counterplan is a hard sell. Because of that, the affirmative is going to say reject the team. The impact is education and fairness. Okay. Um, That's a theory shell from the affirmative side. As the negative, you want to answer a theory shell the same way that you would approach a topicality debate. You're going to have a counterinterpretation. You're going to have standards, all those things. So read your own theory shell for why your practice should be allowed. Uh, Counterinterpretation, the negative says. The negative can read the 50 states counterplan. First, education. Testing federal versus state efficiency is a core component of healthcare debates. Whether or not the power to implement a healthcare system should be left to the federal government or state government. That is a core question of this 2026-27 topic, and it would not be educational to leave that entirely out just because it makes debates a tiny little harder. Second, it's predictable. Numerous sources discuss state implementation, even if not all 50 states are written about at once, which is true. There are certain articles out there on the internet that does talk about what 50 state healthcare coverage would look like, what it would look like for each state to adopt their own healthcare coverage, what it would look like for all 50 states to adopt universal healthcare coverage, not under the federal government, but under state government systems. It is true, there's no like one for each state, but there are people talking about like on a broad sense. So maybe it is predictable. Second or third, reasonability. If debates can feasibly function, vote negative. Okay. Um, if you want to learn more about reasonability, you should check out the intro to topicality video. All right. This word was thrown around on the affirmative side, reject the team. So, the point of theory debate is to show if a certain practice is allowed in debate or not. And the goal that you should have is if you are the one reading a theory argument, you want to make it rise to the level of it being a reason to reject the team, a reason they should flat out lose on face. If they do these things, they are essentially rigging the game in their favor. Because of that, the only viable option is to reject the team, kick them out, assess flagrant two, they're out the game, ejected, like stuff like that. You want to make it rise to that level. Uh, the team proposing the theory violation will argue that the practice in question is grounds to vote down the team. The side that is defending the practice should instead argue that it's a reason to reject the argument, not the team. Most theory violations in all reality could be true. Like it could be true that the 50 states counterplan is kind of unfair. Could be true that utopian fiat is unfair. But is that a reason to just flat out stop like the debate? Probably not. Because of that, most judges are willing to grant a reject the argument but not the team scenario. Whereas if you're the affirmative, you have alleged that the state's counterplan is cheating and you're winning your theory violation. The negative can still like walk out of that by saying reject the argument, not the team. It like this violation, even if true, does not rise to the level of us losing because it did not make your strategy that much harder. Like for example, uh, if your answers to the state's counterplan include two different cards explaining why state healthcare coverage wouldn't work, and then a permutation, and then a theory argument as well. That is evidence enough that you had something to say as the affirmative. So if the negative comes up and says, sure, look, we're losing the theory argument, but reject the argument, not the team. They were prepared enough. This does not warrant this level of losing the debate. That is where reject the argument, not the team, comes in. Um, if you are the practicing team, i.e., the person doing the theory violation in question, you can use reject the argument as a backup in case you are losing the theory debate. Because again, like in my opinion, it's like something I noticed is that judges are a little too scared to pull the trigger on rejected team. You will have some, which means that you should not neglect the theory debate, the theory debate. But most judges like probably will not go to that level. They're chicken. Most judges don't want to do it. It's too much responsibility. They want to see the debate play out. Okay. Important notes. Something you'll see if you stick around in debate, make it to the varsity division, is that advanced debates make theory shells really short and then they explode later on. So, standard theory shells should be inter-violation standards impact, but as debaters move on, they want to get faster, they want to make more arguments in less time. They like super condense these theory shells to be state's counterplan is a reason to reject the team, causes time skew, forces the outs to debate unqualified solvency explanations. The impact is fairness. Move on. Like that takes maybe a couple of seconds to get out versus this entire affirmative show that I just showed you that would maybe take like 30 seconds. The reason I already talked about the reason why they do this, but it's just something to watch out for. If this is the case, you want to adjust how long it takes for you to respond to this theory violation, and it also tells you about your opponent's strategy. If they're just shotgunning theory violations, they're not serious about it. Yeah, they're only reason they would extend it and like explode on it later on is if it's their last resort. But if you see something like small like this, respond to it obviously, but don't give a 2 minute theory response. You probably need maybe something that matches these words or maybe just a little bit more, but it's really like not that. It should not be a big deal if you see something of this size. Um, okay, counter plans that often result in theory debates. So, in the JV division, you probably only have one counter plan that rises to the level of a theory violation, but these are helpful to know about. So, first one is the state's counter plan, specifically for any domestic topic like the healthcare topic. This is always going to be a big thing. Since most 1NCs will not contain a real solvency advocate and have 50 states fiat the counter plan, theory debate always comes up about whether or not this should be an allowable practice. Second, private actor counterplan. So this includes anything that is not a government agency. This could be NGOs, corporations, the public, any private company. Um, if the negative is allowed to fiat any private actor, the research burden for the affirmative just becomes extremely like untenable, and it makes it extremely unpredictable for the affirmative side to be able to understand what the negative might say. If they're allowed to say any corporation, any NGO, any person in the public, like that's more than a billion different counterplans that the affirmative has to anticipate. That's really unfair. Even if the affirmative could theoretically, like with infinite prep time, like find all the answers they need in the world, it's just not a realistic burden to hold someone to. International actor counterplan. This just means any counterplan that has a country that is not the US do something. Um, Process counterplans, counterplans that condition the plan upon a certain process happening. So one way that this might pop up is consult counterplans. They usually compete off of the word should in a plan text. So 1ACs will always say plan, the USFG should do these things. The negative is going to say uh, it should do the plan on the condition that this certain court or that this certain organization says yes to the plan. If they say yes, then fine, do it. If they say no, then don't do it. They're going to compete off of the word should in the plan text. They're going to read like T definitions that say should means immediate, whereas the counterplan uses the word ought or uh, like does different mechanism to make sure that it kind of stops the process of the plan being immediate. The process counterplans usually just straight up steal the plan, but add like a little caveat in the mix. The way that the negative will try to justify a process counterplan is by using theory to explain why process counterplans are legitimate, but also proving why the counterplan competes on a textual and functional level. They'll read definitions. But again, this is something that if you want to learn more about, you should check out the varsity folder for this. But as of right now, I believe you should only be focusing on the counterplan in the file for the given season. With that being said, I hope this helped, and yeah.